All right, hello, everybody. Welcome to On the Contrary, the show where we'll break down all of the NFL for you, including tonight's Thursday showdown slate, big matchup between the Vikings and the Rams to talk about. I'm Chris Spags, joined today, the number one DFS player in the world, the namesake of our very website, Osmo, better known as to human beings as Alex Baker. Alex, how are you doing tonight?
Hey man, doing good. Looking forward to talking some football, especially having some more time between now and Sunday to let everything ruminate so we can really be focused by then.
Yeah, hopefully a little more time to think about the alternatives to Mohamed Sanu that were available. We'll figure that out this week. And of course, also joined by a Roto World senior editor, one of the foremost minds out there on social media and the internet about football, Evan Silva. Evan, how are you doing on this fine Thursday?
Doing well, man. Nice to be back. I'm excited to break down this specific game and also whatever we can get to on the week 4 slate.
Yeah, so let's do the one thing we like to do up front, Evan. I always like to give you the floor kind of to set the table and give us one little peek into Alex's brain using your equally big brain to kind of figure out what he has to offer the world at large. What do you want to ask Alex this week about either his process or whatever he does to get ready for NFL?
I don't know. I feel like I've picked his brain a lot the last 2 weeks.
It's pretty empty now.
I really just want to talk to him about specific players' pricing, especially like on FanDuel. Have you put much time into FanDuel yet this week, Osmo?
Oh yeah, I've been putting in some crunches already. I definitely noticed there's some interestingly priced guys.
Yeah. Can I ask you about 3 specific guys?
Sure.
Okay. Tyler Eifert at 4,600 on FanDuel in maybe the biggest shootout of the week, Atlanta, Cincinnati.
Okay, so let me pull my crunch here. Obviously, Eifert isn't the guy who gets like monster targets, but I have him projected for 5 targets this week, which if he has some positive variance there, that could end up with a good result. The thing I like about Eifert is that he gets more touchdowns than you would expect based on his targets. I guess he's just a big red zone threat. So I really like that for stacking up tight end quarterback.
Okay, I dig it. And what I wanted to add to that is that Tyler Eifert, so his snap rates and his route totals have been on the incline each week. Okay, he was at 41% snaps in week 1, 64% snaps in week 2, 65% snaps in week 3, 18 pass routes run in week 1, 34 pass routes run in week 2, 36 pass routes run last week. Targets also on the incline, 3, 4, 8. The Falcons have lost both of their starting safeties, Ricardo Allen and Keanu Neal, to season-ending injuries, and they lost their middle linebacker, Deion Jones, to a foot injury to injury reserve. Those tend to be the positions that end up covering tight ends, and his usage is on the rise. So at 4,600, which is what, $100 more than the minimum, Tyler Eifert is really, really attractive to me. Another guy I wanted to ask you about, Osimo, on FanDuel was Antonio Callaway at minimum price. I'd be surprised if this is not a guy that stood out to you because he had 10 freaking targets last week.
Oh yeah, I mean that definitely gets on my radar. So he's definitely like that was one of the players I was talking about when the pricing just seemed to stand out because 4,500. I think Baker Mayfield will pass more than Tyrod. So I think that bodes well for him having even more success than he would if Tyrod was QB. And I think the price is really good. The only caveat I have is that we project him for 14.4% ownership on FanDuel.
Okay.
So he will be one of the higher owned players of the week.
Okay, so 14.4, we can definitely overcome that.
Yeah.
And he's still, like, for a lot of players, like, look, he's in the minimum bin. Like, some people just don't. I've been guilty of this over the years. They just don't scroll that low. So he may even go lesser owned than your guys' projection. A couple of things that stood out to me about Antonio Callaway. First of all, like I watched him a lot and studied him coming out of college. He actually didn't even play football in 2017. He had like severe off-field issues. But when I watched like 3 or 4 of his games in college, he reminded me a lot of Santonio Holmes, a big-time playmaker with just monster big play ability. Watched him a lot in the preseason. I play a lot of preseason DFS. In the first preseason game, he played with Baker Mayfield. And he had just gotten in trouble. If you watch Hard Knocks, he had just gotten like, I don't know, some marijuana citation or something silly. And as the punishment, they played him the entire game. And he had 3 catches for 87 yards and a touchdown. I think every pass was delivered by Baker Mayfield, who of course is going to be the starter this week. And also, if you look at the Raiders defense right now, they cannot rush the passer. They have the worst pass rush in the NFL. So that is going to increase the time in the pocket for Baker Mayfield, at least theoretically. He's going to have more time to drop back and scan. And also the Raiders, despite facing the 3rd fewest pass attempts in the NFL, they've only faced 92 pass attempts so far. They have allowed the 3rd most completions of 20-plus yards. So they are highly vulnerable to big plays down the football field. And we have Antonio Callaway, the biggest downfield playmaker in this Browns offense. He's going to be high variance. You know, he's not – he might come out of this game with 4 targets and 2 catches for 17. You know, but at minimum price, man, he looks sexy to me on paper at least.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a compelling play there with Baker Mayfield. And one of the plays too, I think, is kind of going a little underrated. His price isn't fantastic on DraftKings. He's kind of close with a group of more qualified guys like, Andy Dalton is a pretty close price to him. Andrew Luck, if you think his shoulder isn't as destroyed as it may be, is pretty close to him. While we're talking about the Cleveland-Oakland game, I also would say Jarvis Landry, even though he's a little bit priced up, he's really going to benefit the most from having Baker Mayfield out there. Obviously, Callaway and Mayfield are going to have more of a connection, having been, on the second team unit, having been in rookie camps together. They've had a little more time to build up the connection. But Landry and Mayfield, I think, have gotten enough reps, and Landry's just was clearly stifled underneath Tyrod Taylor and just how he approached every single down. So I think he's a play too, where people might be tempted to go Callaway, but let's not forget that Landry is getting 13 targets a game. And
I really think that everyone in the Browns passing game is going to benefit because they're just going to be more completions. You know, they're going to complete passes at a higher rate. David Njoku is a guy like he had 33 yards on 12 targets from Tyrod Taylor. Baker Mayfield comes in last week. He gets targeted twice, 36 yards. You know, and David Njoku is like an incredibly talented player. It's just the entire passing game efficiency is going to spike. I don't know the completion rate of Tyrod Taylor off the top of my head. I would guess it was like in the friggin' 40s.
Yeah,
but I think that Baker Mayfield will be above 60, and that will just help everyone in the passing game, just getting the ball more.
Yeah, and in a matchup too, a perfect one that sets up well for them. Alex, go ahead.
I definitely agree with you guys that Baker Mayfield, Tyrod, and Callaway all are in play for DFS, but the theme of the show is being contrary, so I'm going to have to pull out a piece of opposing evidence. Right now, Baker Mayfield is projected to be the 6th highest owned quarterback. I feel like he's been getting like a ton of hype in social media, which isn't really factored into our ownership. And I think that if you think you're going to be sneaky by having Baker Mayfield in your lineups, you better think again.
It's a fair point. So it might be a spot then to take some of the weapons that we mentioned with Levin's hype of Callaway and me saying Landry. I think that might be a spot then where they're definitely quarterbacks with similar upside at similar prices, or more upside rather. So I think you could take the weapons there and probably get a little different. Let's talk about the Thursday game though, because that is the one coming up. People are asking questions in the chat right now about it. Showdown slates are a different approach. Alex, I guess, do you have any sort of 30-mile view you want to give the folks on how they might want to approach an NFL showdown slate?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the fun part of Showdown or single game to me is that when you're playing a team like normally in a 13-game slate, you can't really build in like too much correlation. You can only have a few guys from the same game. But like every single player in the field is correlated to a certain extent in a single game. So that really makes the strategy interesting, for how to approach it, because it's not only about projecting the players, but building in that correlation into your
So in
lineup.
this particular slate, is there anything you're seeing as that's a market inefficiency with the Rams or the Vikings?
Yeah, definitely. I think that today is going to be a really good one for the pass game. Uh, on DraftKings, I like Cousins a little bit more. On FanDuel, I like Goff a little bit more. But I think probably the best way to approach the slate, in my opinion, is to pick a receiver or two from one team, the quarterback, maybe a running back, and maybe a kicker or defense. Throw it in there.
Okay, yeah, and it does seem like a matchup too. That could go either way, really. I mean, the Vikings seem due for some regression. Evan, obviously, you're a guy who watches that stuff a little more closely. With that Vikings Bill matchup, do you think that was just an aberration game, or are the Vikings actually in some sort of trouble this year?
When you see like a situation like that where I mean, that might be the biggest upset that we see all season. I mean, it actually likely is to be. I mean, no, any team that's favored by 17, we might have 4 or 5 teams favored by 3 scores all year. And it's unlikely that any of the other ones are going to actually lose the game. But that did happen. I mean, yeah, it's certainly. I think it's multiple factors. This Everson Griffin situation where he's been having like mental health issues, and he's like a leader on their defense. That could have played a role. I think that overlooking the Bills and looking forward to the Thursday night game against the Rams, who, the Rams and the Vikings are theoretically supposed to both be, Super Bowl contenders in the NFC. That could have played a role. It could have played a role that, the Vikings. I mean, well, it certainly played a role if you watch the actual game that the Vikings left tackle Riley Reef got his ass beaten by Jerry Hughes. Riley Reef, I think I looked at the total because it was just like every single play, especially early in the play. They started the game with strip sacks on each of the first 2 possessions. Okay, so and then I looked at Pro Football Focus. How many hurries did they charge Riley Reef with? The left tackle for the Vikings, 12 hurries. And he just got his butt beat by Jerry Hughes. And Riley Reef, like the Vikings offensive line, like on the interior, that's where their problems are supposed to be. It's not supposed to be Riley Reef. Riley Reef is supposed to be solid. But when you have like essentially what you consider to be your best offensive lineman getting his ass beat every play, that's a little scary. And now they have to go face this Rams defense that has Ndamukong Suh, that has Aaron Donald on the interior. I mean, they can wreck the interior of the Vikings offensive line. So it's definitely a little scary there for the Vikings. I mean, this is supposed to be one of the best teams in the NFL. They were my Super Bowl pick from the NFC, but we know that they have this one significant weakness, and now they're on a short week on the road in LA. Teams do not travel well out to the West Coast. It's actually even worse traveling to the West Coast than it is West Coast teams traveling to the East Coast.
Didn't know that.
A lot of concerns here.
Yeah, I think the one thing that does kind of go in the Vikings' favor is that the Rams aren't really generating much pressure on the pass game. Their sack rate is pretty low, getting sacked on just 4% of pass attempts for opponents. I would assume that should get a little better just because the defense is better, but the secondary seems like there should be some trickle down there where they might not be able to get as much pressure because you have to have more guys back to fill in for Aqib Talib, and I assume Marcus Peters is out. I haven't seen news on that. Whatever. If he is out,
apparently Marcus Peters is active.
Is
but if a dude's out here with a strained calf, it doesn't mean he's going to be effective. Especially at the cornerback position, like he needs his legs. He needs to be able to backpedal, right? So him playing is not necessarily a positive thing for the Rams. I mean, we could go through one possession or 2 possessions and it's like, hey, we can't play you, dude. He's being tough. He's from Oakland. Marcus Peters he's a bad MFer. He's tough as nails. And I'm sure he's telling the coaching staff that, hey, I want to go play. But he might be ineffective. Like Stephon Diggs could just roll him up real quick. Don't view like Marcus Peters playing as necessarily like, oh, I'm worried now.
Right. Yeah, no, those injuries can linger there, and they could be an issue. Alex, I guess for you, anything in this game jumping out in terms of the skill positions that you would want to go to? I mean, obviously you have a bunch of high targeted players with Thielen, some more evenly distributed targets on the Rams side. Which guys at the skill positions do you think are the most important to have in your lineups?
So I want to backtrack a little bit and go back to Evan's comment about the West Coast game. I know whenever guys go into LA, that's especially like concerning because they're celebrities. It's got the celebrity culture there. They might be going out to the clubs and partying. So Chris, did you see any of them at the Gentlemen's Club last night?
Yeah, we all met up, threw some dollars at girls, had a night. No, the Vikings, I don't know. I don't know if they're big partiers, but if they sent me an invite, I must have gotten lost in the mail, unfortunately.
Okay. So back to the question. These are teams with star skill players, so you can. It's a showdown slate, so you can take your pick. But Adam Thielen, Todd Gurley, those are the guys in my top lineup on DraftKings.
Oh man, go bold here, Awesemo. Jesus.
On FanDuel, I'm liking the Rams receivers a little bit more, just from roster construction. So I have Cooks and Woods in my lineup.
Yeah, Woods is a player who doesn't get enough recognition for being good, especially, I think it is a stat I've no way to prove, but he must have more catches than anybody at the Coliseum, given that there hasn't been an NFL team in years, and he was also USC's leading receiver of all time. But Woods is a great play, I think, always. People kind of underappreciate him, but he's very good at finding holes. He gets targeted downfield. Goff trusts him. One thing I think is also worth noting in this game before we move through the rest of the slate, the Vikings have been really bad at giving up first downs by penalty, giving up a first down by penalty on 6% of their plays almost. Given that Brandon Cooks is one of the better players at drawing flags downfield, I do think that there is a chance for them to move the ball downfield without picking up yards, just with Cooks kind of flailing about as he does sometimes on deep balls. Yeah, let's go through the rest of the slate because we do have some chalky matchups. Our ownership projections, by the way, are out now at Osmo.com. If you use promo code
I think we should I think we should jump into like maybe some sleeper plays for tonight.
Okay. Oh yeah, sleeper plays for tonight. I just want to get the plug in, Evan.
Okay. Sorry.
No, we do. We also have showdown rankings right now on Osmo.com. Use promo code Contrary, get 1 week free trial. Go check it out for yourself. You can do stuff for showdown, stuff for the main slate on Sunday as well. All the information you need, including things directly from Osmo himself, handcrafted with love. So go join now, Osmo.com premium, and use promo code Contrary. But sleeper plays from this game, I guess anybody jumping out to you, Evan, since you put the question out there.
Yeah, sorry, Spags.
Hey, I just want Alex to make money to pay us.
Well, if Kirk Cousins gets hurt by a Riley Reef pass rush, then Trevor Siemian. No, I'm just kidding. Isn't that how last Thursday's game actually went?
Yep.
Someone won like $250,000 because they played Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, Baker at like 1%, I think.
Well, the crazy thing is, like 6.6% of people had him, so it wasn't like one person had him. That was the difference maker. It's like thousands of people had him.
Okay.
And nobody probably getting pulled tonight, I would assume.
Oh no, man! After last week,
hopefully
Cousins gets benched, right?
They're like, we had enough of this guy we paid $50 million a year for. Let's get him out. Trevor Siemian.
Awesemo laughs and then like increases his cruncher percentage to 35%.
Gotta play the variance.
Just a couple of sleeper plays. These are not necessarily good plays. Like we're throwing darts here. But Malcolm Brown, the Rams' number 2 running back, I've noticed that they have tried to get him involved a little bit more like earlier in the game. Last couple of weeks, especially last week and against Arizona. If he comes up with like 8 carries he averaged like 8 yards a carry last week. If he comes with, like 11 carries for, he breaks a big one and scores a touchdown, he's an interesting guy. So Malcolm Brown, I think, would be among the sleepers. The tight ends for the Rams, I want to like them because we have seen the Vikings really get hurt by tight ends so far this year. it's hard to put your finger on, between Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett. They have 4 targets apiece through 3 games. So, I mean, Gerald Everett is the more athletic dude. Tyler Higbee gets a little bit more snaps. But, just guys to mention on the Rams side. On the Vikings side, Laquan Treadwell, he's bad at football. Okay, he's like legit bad, but he has 14 targets through 3 games, so he's almost at 5 targets per game. He has dropped 4 of them, a league high. But I think he does have a touchdown, and so he's a guy to mention. He plays on the outside, which is where the Rams' cornerback injuries are. So look, if he somehow like lucks into 3 for 54 and a touchdown, he could be a difference maker. CJ Ham, their fullback, somehow has 8 targets. I'll leave it at that. Dalvin Cook is active for the game, but he's playing through a hamstring injury. So it's entirely possible that Latavius Murray ends up getting more snaps than him. And then David Morgan, the number 2 tight end for the Vikings, they love him as a blocker. He was out last week. They kind of attributed some of their pass protection problems to not having him. He may end up playing 30 snaps, and hey, if he runs into the end zone 2 times and catches, 2 of 2 targets for 14 yards and 2 touchdowns, he could be a difference maker. But I just wanted to bring up some guys that, maybe people are not thinking about, because I know that, on these showdown slates or whatever, you have to have someone that just nobody else has.
Yeah, Morgan is one who I think is interesting too. At $200 on DraftKings, he does kind of fit some of the lineups to cram in the higher usage players. And he was actually, I thought I was pretty clever getting to him. But one thing I like to do for the showdown slates, which actually worked pretty well in the Pittsburgh-Tampa game with Ryan Switzer. I don't think the outcomes are always going to be that good of getting a touchdown. But farming for guys who are cheaper at that $200 to $2,000 who are getting any sort of targets, any sort of snap count at all. And Morgan does fit that criteria. Ham, I think, doesn't quite as much because he was playing from behind last week. So that would be the one spot that I would be a little concerned with going to. But yeah, I think if you are farming for super cheap guys with maybe the faintest bit of upside, those are a couple guys there who can differentiate. And Treadwell as well, I think, is a little more expensive, but does make sense. Alex, let's talk about the chalkiest game on the slate. We'll go to the main slate now before we actually have to go watch the game. Let's talk about the Cincinnati-Atlanta game that we talked about a little bit up front. That's going to be a very high ownership game, very popular all around. Should be a track meet. What are you doing there to get contrarian on either side, Alex?
Well, Matt Ryan, he was the guy that won someone $1 million this week, right? Or last week?
He was.
So I'm thinking maybe there'll be some recency biases there. Sounds like Dalton's not going to be sneaky either. One contrarian game stack I might try to pull off is Indianapolis versus Houston. I mean, Andrew Luck hasn't been good so far at all, but he's been passing a ton, and that kind of creates a recipe for a shootout. If you kind of, you could take either side of the game. You could pick Watson or Luck. Pair them with Ebron, Hopkins. I think that game definitely has potential.
Ooh, I like to hear that, dude. I like to hear that because I like that game a lot.
You don't have any.
I like T.Y. Hilton a lot this week.
No concerns about Luck's shoulder and the fact that they even brought in Brissett to throw a Hail Mary because Luck just can't chuck it at all downfield.
Of course, I have concerns about all that. I mean, but we're trying to be game theorists here, right? Right, Osimo? So we know what the popular narrative is, and guess what? One of the reasons that they're throwing short is because their friggin' tackles are terrible. It's not necessarily because Andrew Luck can't throw. I mean, it's not like they've attempted 0 passes downfield. I did look at the game from last week, and Andrew Luck threw 2 passes kind of deep downfield to T.Y. Hilton, and both were kind of underthrown, and they drew DPIs on both of them for big gains. Now they're back at home though. That was a game, in Philadelphia. That's not like a comfortable environment for a quarterback at all, especially like with the Philly defensive line. They're back at home. J.J. Watt is going to be a major concern, like no question, on the right side of the offensive line. But that's also, as a right-handed thrower for Andrew Luck, like he can see J.J. Watt the whole game. It's not like he's looking at, the back of J.J. Watt, or he's not, J.J. Watt's not coming on his blind side. So he's going to know where he is. And he's played against J.J. Watt a lot. Like, they play in the same division. And they're going to have to get the ball out of his hands quickly. But T.Y. Hilton has double-digit targets in every game so far. He has 6 red zone targets. That's a lot. He has 4 targets inside the 10-yard line. That's a lot for a small dude, through 3 games. And I think that this game can surprise and be like a 34-24 type game. And I love that. I love hearing the optimism from Osimo in this game.
Yeah, no, I do think that does make sense. And both teams also have been giving up a ton of completions on both sides. Indianapolis allowing a 71.2% completion rate. Houston allowing a 73.3% completion rate. I do think that it does grade out well. I think the tough thing for me, and it's actually a question for you, Alex, how much are you looking at the plays per game? I know that for you in the NBA, pace is a very big issue. And we might have talked about this briefly before. But for me, part of the reason the Cincinnati-Atlanta game is hard to get away from in terms of at least the game stack of position players is both those teams are having a ton of plays run against them per game. Cincinnati's allowing 75 plays per game run against them. Atlanta having 69 plays run against them. So both on the really high end of the NFL. Is that something you would look at to say like, oh, here's a point of differentiation? Because it has held true for the first couple weeks, but I'm not sure if that's a limited sample size thing or what.
I definitely think pace is relevant, but I think the stat that would be more relevant is the rate at like how many seconds it takes them to run an average play. Because I don't think that opponents' pace is going to be changed by who they're facing necessarily. And you're going to need to go back a significant number of games to last season because game flow determines the pace like so much that like teams like as a strategy will try to slow down the game or speed it up based on whether they're winning or losing. So I'm actually sorry to be contrary, but I don't project this game to have more plays than your average game.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm glad to confirm that now because it was something that jumped off the page to me. But I do think that it tends to benefit matchups with both have high octane offenses instead of like, you're not expecting the Tennessee defense to all of a sudden start slinging it because they're in a matchup with Atlanta. Not that they could anyway. They don't even have a quarterback really at this point. What other games, Alex, are jumping off the page to you besides that Houston game?
Well, I got one deep sleeper I'm looking at here. So I don't know if I'll be on him by Sunday, but in my initial projections, Mitch Trubisky is an option in my opinion because of the pricing. I think he has 3 receivers that are all viable: Taylor Gabriel, Trey Burton, and Allen Robinson. I think versus Tampa Bay, that definitely could be a shootout. I don't think Trubisky is good at all, but I think his receiving core is like so much better this year than last year that there's just more chance that he'll go off. I know he's only thrown 2 touchdowns so far this year, so this is that's why he's 1.9% owned.
Yeah, I was on the Trubisky train last week versus the Cardinals, and it didn't go so well for me. So that scared me away because that was a perfect matchup too, I thought. But the Tampa Bay defense is even worse than Arizona, if there is anything to say to that. So how about you, Evan? How do you feel about Mitch Trubisky being a potential deep sleeper?
I put him in my column because like as a DFS like tournament dart, because I know he's really cheap on DK at like 5,200.
Yep.
He's just like right above minimum. No one's going to want to play him for good reason. The Buccaneers secondary is a total dumpster fire. I mean, and this is another guy where the narrative is really negative on him right now. And again, for good reason, but that also can play to our benefit if we're going to be tournament players in daily fantasy, right? And we like Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson, a great spot. Trey Burton's in a great spot. Taylor Gabriel has not ripped any big plays yet, but we know that that's in his toolbox. So if everything kind of comes together against this league worst pass defense, and the Bears are at home, and Buccaneers have been decent at defending the run, and hey, maybe the Bucs go there and score some points and force the Bears to make some throws, and Trubisky also can run it. I mean, he's like 8th among quarterbacks in rushing yards. So hey, if he throws for 2 and runs for 1, you're looking pretty hot.
Yeah, and Allen Robinson has proven himself to be a pretty capable target as well. So, I mean, there are some stack potentials there. I just know that I was doing that last week and it didn't go so well. But, it's not a reason to not try again. Obviously, you got to go back to the well. But that was a real kick in the dick, I'll tell you that.
You won't be, Spags. You will not be using any Mitch Trubisky this week, I guarantee you.
I don't know. I like getting burned.
Because we're all humans, and Oh, you like, yeah. One thing I wanted to mention from that first game that we did not mention, I was talking to my buddy Warren Sharp earlier in the week, or actually earlier today, and he was like, hey, the Texans, they suck against tight ends. He's like, he's always asking me like, who's gonna play in the game, because he doesn't like follow the injuries quite as closely as I do. And he's like, and I texted him early that Doyle was DNP on Wednesday, and Eric Ebron was even DNP, did not practice on Wednesday. But today, Doyle was out and Ebron was back in. And Eric Ebron, did he stink last week? Yeah. That's what Eric Ebron does. But he did lead the Colts in targets with 11. And he ran 41 pass routes. And in the first 2 games with Doyle in, he was at around 20 pass routes. So he essentially doubled his pass routes with Doyle out, and it looks like Doyle is going to be out again. Okay, so that's a significant opportunity. 11 targets for a tight end. That's like Gronk. Kelsey doesn't even get that. Ertz does. But, not many tight ends in the NFL even have the capability of getting 11 targets in a game, let alone running 41 routes. So, and then Warren mentioned to me that he's like, the Texans suck against tight ends. So I went back and I looked at just the raw stats, okay? And I was like, well, they played Gronk in week 1. He had a monster week 1. Gronk, we can't really – that hurts our context, okay? And then in weeks 2 and 3, they didn't really even play any good tight ends. Evan Ingram got hurt against them last week. And in week 2, they played the Titans without Delaney Walker. So then I just went and looked at the efficiency of quarterbacks when they are throwing to tight ends against the Texans, and this stood out to me. When quarterbacks throw to tight ends against the Texans, they are 13 of 14 for 196 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, a significant piece of that is Rob Gronkowski. But he's actually the only guy who had a missed target. Every other tight end that has been targeted against the Texans, it's been a completion every single time. And so I just wanted to mention that for the cause of Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron he had 3 end zone targets last week, and they didn't hit him. So, and he has 6 red zone targets on the year. So I wanted to mention him. He let a lot of people down last week. He's again in that hot recency bias spot, has a great matchup, and it looks like no Jack Doyle again.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Always going back to the well when a player burned people but had the opportunity does make sense. That's actually one of my favorite metrics that you reference a lot. The Josh Hirschmeyer, I forget his name, the air yards guy. The air yards by low stat I think is pretty interesting, and just applying that concept in general. And Ebron would definitely fit that criteria. Osmo, give me your thoughts on the, I don't know why I went Osmo there. Alex, give me your thoughts on the New England running back situation. We have 2 guys there. One of them expected to get a ton more ownership in Sony Michel. James White expected to be less owned. Obviously, that's going to be a tough choice to make, but maybe a necessary one given that this New England-Miami game could be pretty profitable from a fantasy standpoint. What are you doing with the New England running back situation, Alex?
Yeah, I definitely think it's interesting with Burkhead out. The thing is, I think still a timeshare between James White and Sonny Michel. So I think these guys might be good plays, but they're not like crazy value like some of the other guys I think we're going to see this week.
So you don't think there's not going to be enough usage potentially, even with
Also, is just hedging, dude. He's just hedging. He's gonna be playing Kenyon Barner this week. Kenyon Barner is gonna be his Devontae Parker of Week 4. We all know it.
Do you see any usage for?
I got to claim a win on Devontae Parker because, well, first of all, Evan talked me out of him. All the evidence was there that Parker was a really bad play, but he went out there and played as many snaps as any of the other wide receivers, and I think he got like 40 yards, which is about what I had him for. So my projection actually was pretty accurate.
Awesome. That's not a win, dude.
Unfortunately, though, yeah, you did talk me out of him, which ended up being really good.
You're welcome. He did play a lot of snaps. 75% of the snaps, they really did. They ran him right back out there. But there are other things that you need to consider though too. I mean, he hasn't practiced in like 6 weeks, dude. So is his quarterback? You have to think of I've talked about I've talked to actual quarterbacks about this. Anytime that I ever meet a quarterback, I talk about is there a guy that you always look for when you're in trouble? Is there I always ask them shit like that because I want to get into their brains, and they generally all say the same thing. There are definitely guys that they trust, and then there are dudes that they know have talent that they don't trust, but they'll certainly, certain situations will throw it to them. There are guys that, hey, the scheme wants them to get the ball, and I don't know. That's literally, it doesn't matter. I've met quarterbacks that were, they played at the D3 level. And every single time I ask them about all this, I just want to get in their heads. And there is no question that, after just talking to them, that chemistry and rapport is huge to a quarterback, and trust. And we've seen that with Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers most prominently. If Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers does not trust you, you're not playing. And in some cases, the dudes might play, but they just won't get the ball,
like Sony Michel.
Well, he has gotten the ball, but he stunk. I mean, he's been bad.
Well, Brady called him out pretty directly, I thought, when he was we want to have the guys who make plays, and we're out there. It wasn't comfortable.
And he was speaking directly about James White. That's, and this is all narrative stuff. I mean, this is not data backed, but that's why kind of like James White this week. And also the Dolphins have been good in run defense, but they've given up a lot of production to passing game backs. So yeah, their linebackers really can't cover. They have bad coverage linebackers. So that makes me interested a little bit in James White. But I mean, with Devontae Parker, you have to understand he was out for over a month. Just to jump right back in and be a hot target, but hey, Awesemo, look, if he had a big play in the game. I mean, he had over a 30-yard gain. I think it was in the third quarter. Hey, if that would have gone for a touchdown, no one has him. I would have felt bad.
I mean,
so what do you?
I think we all take responsibility for who we put in our lineups. Well, I gotta ask you though. He took a price decrease from 4,100 to 3,500 on DraftKings. He's one of the cheapest playable guys. Do you think maybe I should go back?
See, here's the thing. Now this is the week to play him, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wait, he went from 4,500 to 3,500?
4,200 to 3,500.
Okay, that's a significant drop. I mean, he's going to be sub 1% in a better matchup, I think. That was another thing about the Raiders cornerbacks are actually kind of good on the outside. The Patriots cornerbacks they're trash. I mean, Gilmore's good, but we never know where he's going to be, and he gets beat too. This actually might be the week to play him, and especially if they're chasing. I mean, hey, they're almost 8-point dogs or 7-point dogs. If they're chasing and we get 7 or 8 targets from Devontae Parker, I think this is probably the week.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you giving me some words of encouragement here.
It's a very emotionally supportive show. Fantasy Horse in the chat, though, does point out no Miami wide receiver has been targeted more than 5 times this year. It does seem like it's a very tricky, gadgety kind of offense, and that does make me worry a little bit. But besides Stills, I mean, Parker's really the only legit kind of receiver, big-bodied guy who can make a play. And I think the gadgetry might not work as well versus the Patriots. So
Yeah, I mentioned that statistic in my article. Like Jakeem Grant leads the team with 14 targets through 3 games, so he's under 5 targets per game. However, they have faced the easiest schedule in the NFL. They've been in control of all 3 games. Are they going to go and be in control of this game in Foxborough against against angry Tom Brady? I don't know. Probably not. We're probably going to get 40 attempts this week from Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, that's the main thing I would see too, is that his attempts in the past 3 weeks are 23, 23, 28. He has 7 touchdowns, like passing the ball like almost none. So they've been having a lot of success in the passing game, but he just hasn't had enough competition to really have to pass it a little bit more.
Yo, by the way, Osimo smashed Tannehill as a GPP play last week. That was ridiculous. He had 3 touchdowns last week. Like he was a great play.
He was. It was. That's why we trust him. That's why he gets the name on the website. While we're talking about the game, I guess one question that's pretty relevant and probably more relevant for you, Evan, but also for you, Alex, I guess. But Evan first, what about Josh Gordon? What do you make of his opportunity this week? Is there anywhere to go with that? I mean, given the whole Brady needs to win this game, I think after a terrible showing versus Detroit, and Gordon can get deep better than any receiver they have on the team right now.
I mean, look, Josh Gordon is capable of a big play. I would never deny that, but I think I would probably project him for 4.0 targets. I mean, I think that 3.5 might be too low and 4.5 might be too high. So I'd probably put him like right at 4. And that might just be to keep the defense honest, like throw to him on the first friggin' play. That's what a smart team does. Like just have him run a go. He doesn't know the offense, okay? He's never known an offense in his life. I mean, he played at Baylor under Art Briles. They ran air raid, and they have like literally 10 plays. So you just have him run a go. You throw it to him. Hey, if he catches it, 70-yard gain. It's the Dolphins don't really bring pass rush. I mean, if you're trying to play the game of, hey, this dude could get 11 catches for 143 and 2 touchdowns this week, like with DeAndre Hopkins, or lower down the list, let's say Jarvis Landry, or if Doug Baldwin doesn't play, Tyler Lockett, or a guy like Keenan Allen, or there are guys that have that. Allen Robinson, there are guys that have that in their wheelhouse. I don't think that that's in Josh Gordon's wheelhouse this week. Is like 3 for 89 and 2 touchdowns in his wheelhouse? Absolutely.
Yeah, and the trust thing you mentioned before, I think, is relevant here too, especially with Tom Brady and what we talked about with him calling guys out. If Gordon isn't in the right spots and they put him in positions to fail instead of succeed, he can quickly sour that relationship. At least,
but what they need from him, though, and I think the reason that they acquired him is because they need him to take attention away from their other guys, because no one respects their other guys. Last week, I mean, it was a dedicated double team on Gronk the entire game. The Jaguars just have too much athleticism. Gronk hasn't done anything in 2 weeks, man, and teams aren't afraid of Philip Dorsett. Chris Hogan's good, but teams aren't really afraid of him. And, Brady hasn't really played well. So what they need Josh Gordon for is really to just run like clear out routes and create space for the other dudes in the middle of the field.
Yeah, and that should be something he should be capable of doing. And I think there is an opportunity there for the Hogans and the Dorsetts of the world and Gronk to get off a little more with the attention that's going to have to go his way, whether he's getting the ball thrown to him or not. We're running a little low on time, so let's go through a little bit faster through some of the other important games. Evan, give me a contrarian view of this New Orleans New York Giants game. It's one of the second highest scoring total game on the slate. Obviously, New Orleans is going to be highly owned with Breeze and Kamara and Thomas as well. What are you doing here?
I'm definitely making Eli tournament lineups, at least one, maybe two.
I like it.
It sets up really well for OBJ. It's time for OBJ. I mean, we've seen the good games. We need a blow up game. It's about to happen with Sterling Shepard. So you're pulling Evan Ingram out of the offense. Okay, what's that, like 5 to 7 targets a game, and you're narrowing the distribution of targets in the offense. So that's good news off the bat. Okay, then and Sterling Shepard's a slot receiver. The Saints lost their slot corner Patrick Robinson to a broken ankle. Sterling Shepard is like in a really good spot in this potential high scoring game. My contrarian take is that the Giants win. Eli throws like 3 or 4. Saquon catches 1, Shepard catches 1, and OBJ catches 2.
Ooh, okay. I like Eli in the matchup too. I think it makes sense. And New Orleans has shown their defense will only stop person if they don't want to throw it, like Tyrod did that one game where he was just afraid to throw it deep. Alex, what are you doing with this New Orleans Giants game? Obviously, a ton of ownership projected on our site on Osmo.com for Breeze and Kamara. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I think there's some really great plays in this game. I don't think anything's going to be too sneaky. I mean, Kamara, Thomas. I think Beckham and Barkley are both really good plays. So I don't think we're gonna wow anybody by telling you this, but yeah, I think that's gonna be a pretty good game for fantasy.
Alex, you just tore up that analysis right there, dude.
Do you have any apprehension, Alex, at playing a guy like Kamara if he's going to be close to 40% owned?
No, I mean the higher guys projected, the less kind of outlier performance you need for winning that week. So I mean, if he gets just what he's been averaging the past 3 weeks, which is in the high 20s or something, that's going to be gravy for you. It's like a free square basically, because you're going to need like five or 6 guys with 30 points or close to it to compete for first in the GPP.
That makes sense. I think that's pretty much for the high total games. Let's just go position by position real fast. Everybody give me one guy you think is going to do better than the public likely thinks he will, and one guy you think is going to fall short. And we'll go position by position. Go QB first, Alex. Who would you say is one guy who's going to excel and one guy who's going to fail?
All right, I would go with Luck to excel, and I think Dalton's getting too much hype. I don't hate him, but I just think he's going to be overowned.
Ooh. All right, Evan, how about you for QB?
I just realized that I need to set my season-long lineups. I have like 11 to set. When does the game start?
7 minutes.
Oh, just forget it. We'll take the zeros. I like again going back to that Indianapolis-Houston game. Ryan Griffin, who was actually suggested by. Did we talk about him on Saturday?
No. Wait, which player? Ryan Griffin.
Ryan Griffin. He's a tight end for the Houston.
For Houston? Yeah, no, we didn't talk about him.
Okay. Because I know there was a player that Mr. Tuttle brought up on the Swolecast on Friday, and then Alex liked him too, and I was like, yes. Oh, it might have been OBJ.
I think we're talking about Lamar Miller.
Ooh, let's not talk about that again. Although he caught a touchdown at the end of the game.
Yeah, he did okay.
Yeah, he caught like a garbage time touchdown.
Better than Murray did, on stupid Latavius Murray.
True. Ooh, that was awful. No, but Ryan Griffin, actually Tuttle brought him up last week on a Friday show, and I just totally dismissed him because he's never done anything when Will Fuller has been in the lineup. But they just lost Bruce Ellington, their slot receiver. And I just dug a little bit deeper into Ryan Griffin. He's 14th among tight ends in routes run. the Colts have been getting ethered by tight ends. And he's playing like 70% of the snaps. So look, and he had 2 catches for 44 last week. I mean, he's got a modicum of big playability. You look at his his athleticism profile coming out of UConn. He was decent. He wasn't great, but he definitely wasn't terrible. So I think if he just gets a target and a half more in our projections, he goes from 4 to 5.5, which I know is aggressive for Ryan Griffin, trust me. But if this game shoots out, Osimo and I think it has a chance to do, he could be like the difference-making super cheap piece at the end of the game stack.
Yeah, Evan, I gotta be honest with you, man. I don't like this pick of Ryan Griffin. I love it.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah, because I mean he's gotten 10 targets so far this year, which is pretty good. The box score is ugly because he hasn't done anything with them. But if you figure every target's worth like a couple of fantasy points, that means he's going to average somewhere in close to 10 points just based on his current production. So if he can take another step forward with Ellington out, then that's a pretty good value play.
And look, if the Colts coach or the Texans coaches go back and look at what happened in week 3, Dallas Goedert goes off, Zach Ertz has a big day, Josh Perkins, the friggin' Eagles' 3rd tight end, he catches like a 10-yard pass. I mean, they had like 160 yards of tight ends last week. If they play more, and they just lost their slot receiver. So if they play more 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets, and Ryan Griffin is on the field every damn down, maybe he can luck into, the 5.5 targets that we're hoping for, fall into the end zone, maybe break a coverage bust, and we get 57 yards. Remember when we talked about last week, we're like, if we fade Julio and he gets 93 yards, we are in a really good spot, right? And that happened. Yeah.
Should have played more Calvin Ridley though. That was one thing. Looking back on, Alex and I both like Mohamed Sanu, a brilliant play. It's going to work out well. Ridley was great last week, but now people are going to tout him. And you know what? It happened. It's 10% ownership of Ridley because he did well in week 2, and then he also put up 40 points. So the kick in the dick. Evan changed the rules there. So Alex, just give me your best position overall, your best play, who is going to be completely under the radar.
I have to agree with Evan on this one, but I think based on our current ownership projections, Eric Ebron's the most under-owned player. He's only projected to be 9.5%, and I'm just seeing the same things as Evan, where he got more routes. I don't know how people missed 11 targets, but if that number stays that low, I'm going to be all over him for a second week.
Okay. And let's see. Anything at running back jumping out to you, I guess, as an overall approach? Anything at running back that Evan, that you would want to fade and maybe get some more of if it's going to be lower owned?
Fade. See, I love Geo. I can't talk myself out of that. I think that Tevin Coleman is going to be under-owned at home against Cincinnati. We saw McCaffrey just crush them right up the gut last week, and they lost a key interior defender. Chris Carson is kind of tempting. 34 touches last week, against this Cardinals defense that has given up 106 rushing attempts. The Cardinals cannot keep their offense on the field. So what happens is teams just end up burying them in rushing attempts. I mean, they have more rushing attempts by every team in the league by 14. I'm not sure that necessarily keeps up. It seems like a statistic that's kind of prime for some regression back to the mean, but they are bad. They're the worst coach team I've seen in the last decade. I mean, it's really, really that bad. And so I don't think Chris Carson's going to get 34 touches again, but if he gets, 23, then you're in a really good spot. And he's still fairly, he's in a good spot in terms of price.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And one guy I just want to point out really fast, who I think is a great running back play. He was always overlooked, but I think last week too, coming off of something of a down game and obviously tough matchup, Melvin Gordon should have the run of the castle this week versus San Francisco. I don't see any way they can stop anything that the Chargers try to do. And to me, Gordon's one of the better players on the slate. Guys, give me one quick wide receiver pick before we go. Alex, you go first. One guy who's going to beat the whole thing for everybody who's playing a tournament this weekend, and it's not Devontae Parker.
Well, one guy I like, I think might go under the radar a little bit. This is a caveat. It depends on injuries with Seattle's receivers, but if Evan's going with Carson, he's like 10% owned on our projections. I'm going to go with Brandon Marshall because he's been getting 6 targets a game. Actually, he's gotten 6. So I think that like at only 4K, I mean that's just like a great value.
Yeah, Evan, how about you? One receiver that's going to beat the projections.
I'll go with I already said Antonio Callaway, right?
Yeah,
Allen Robinson.
Ooh, all right. That's a pretty nice little pick too. You know what? I'm going to stick with a guy who's chalky. I just don't want people to jump off of him because I think he's just a good player, and I just want to talk about him being good. Tyler Boyd. Fucking love Tyler Boyd. That guy's a great player. Just a traditional wide receiver who does a great job bailing Andy Dalton out. I love him.
Yep. That's exactly what he's been doing. He actually scored Pat Thorman from Pro Football Focus had a great chart of last week. It was on Saturday, I think. Yeah, the day before the games, he pushed out this chart of quarterbacks and the most targets when they're under pressure as charted by Pro Football Focus. And the number one guy for Andy Dalton was Tyler Boyd. Not AJ Green, Tyler Boyd. So that's who he was looking to when he was in trouble. And then you go back and watch the Bengals game. Tyler Boyd scored his touchdown on a broken improvisational play, and he also grabbed this 49-yard gain right down the left sideline on another play where Andy Dalton was under pressure. So we have a decent little sample size here, of Andy Dalton. That's who he's looking for when he is pressured. He's looking for Tyler Boyd. He trusts Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, I love him a lot. And I think it doesn't matter if his ownership's getting really high. So there's definitely a logic to fade him just from a game theory perspective. But the talent's really there. And I think he needs to be up to closer to the 6K range before I'm getting off of him. And I think that's it. Any final thoughts from you guys before we go let people watch the game and also watch the three fellas talking football coming up next with Laffy, Andrew, and Ben? Alex, any parting words for the folks?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the fellas talking football show. Andrew, Ben, Laffy, definitely some of the smartest guys in the business. Just thanks everyone for watching, and I hope you continue to tune in. And Evan, as always, is a pleasure. I was hoping to disagree a little bit more this week, but it sounds like we're on the same page.
I know. I don't like it either. Awesome. I don't like it either.
This is how love happens, guys. It's beautiful to see it develop on our little Skype calls. Thank you guys for watching On the Contrary. We'll see you guys again soon. Good luck out there.